Okay, this is grade 8 math links, chapter 2 on proportional reason, chapter 2.3. It's the last section before your test. We're going to start here at question 16 with your story problems, and we're going to go through these one at a time. On your test, there will be story problems similar to some of these, so please make sure you understand how to do it. Question 16 says a gardener takes half an hour to mow and weed a lawn that measures 20 by 15 meters. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of get my bearings and say it's 20 meters by 15 meters, and it takes 30 minutes to do this lawn. He charges $25 an hour. How much should the gardener receive for a lawn that measures 40 by 30? I'm just going to draw a 40 meter by 30 meter lawn here. Now what makes question 16 kind of hard is the fact that it does not say that you need to understand that the area of the lawn is what he is mowing. So you need to know, without it being said, that you have to calculate the area. So if we calculate the area of a rectangle is length times width. So therefore it's 20 times 15, which is 300 square meters. So in other words, it takes him to do a 300 square meter lawn, it takes him 30 minutes. All right? So this lawn over here, its area is length times width, which would be 40 times 30, which is 1,200 square meters. So if we think about how much he would get, if he gets $25 per hour, for this lawn here, he would get $12.50 because it only takes him half an hour, and half of the $25 per hour means he gets $12.50 for that lawn. But for this lawn, since it took him half an hour to do 300 square meters, he would be able to do 600 square meters in 1 hour. And in 2 hours, he would be able to do 1,200 square meters, or twice as much area. So therefore, this lawn would take him 2 hours to do. And therefore, 2 multiplied by the cost of $25 per hour would be $50 to do the second lawn. So one of the misconceptions is because the length is twice as long and the width is twice as long, it will take twice as long to mow the lawn. But the truth is it's not. It's the area we have to look at. And since the area of this one is 300 square meters, and the area of this one is 1,200 square meters, this lawn is 4 times bigger than the other lawn in terms of area. So therefore, it's 4 times as long. Question 17 says, fresh pickerel is advertised at a local market. How much will 6 kilograms of pickerel cost? So right here, we're given a rate of cost to mass, or weight. We're saying it's $17.60 for 2 kgs of pickerel. How much will 6 kilograms cost? Now, if I set up my proportion like this, I know I have 3 ways to solve it. I can use the multiply-divide method. I can use the unit rate method by calculating how much 1 kilogram of pickerel is, or I can use the cross-multiplication method. Now, for those 3 methods, which one is most appropriate, do you think, for this one? Probably the multiply-divide, because I can clearly see that multiplying 2 kilograms by 3 will give me 6, and therefore, I simply have to multiply $17.60 by 3, which will be $17.60 times 3, $52.80, was it? And 80 cents. Now, you could have used the cross multiplication method, but it's less efficient. If you acknowledge that when I set up the proportion like that, multiplication by 3 is all I need to do, great. If you went to a unit rate, you added an unnecessary step, you still got the same answer, but it's not as efficient, right? So we're looking for the best method, and that would be the best method. And it says, using a proportion, find the cost of 1,600 grams of pickerel. So let's use B. Let's set up B like this. So we're going to put the initial $17.60 for 2 kgs. How much is it for 1,600 grams? Now the problem with this proportion is that our units are not measured in the same units. We have one in kilograms and one in grams. So what you need to do is do one of two things. You can change 2 kilograms to 2,000 grams if you'd like, which is what 2 kilograms is, or, 2 kilograms, or you can take 1,600 grams and change it to 1.6 kilograms. Now, of those two options, which one do you like best? I like this one better, right? You don't have to. You can do it either way. But what we're going to do is we're going to put our X there and decide which one is the most efficient method. So if I'm going from 2 kilograms to 1.6, the division method is fairly complex, right? It's not as easy to figure out what do I divide 2 by to get 1.6. So we're not going to use that method. I could figure out what the unit rate is, meaning the cost for 1 kilogram, and then I could figure out the cost of 1.6. That is an okay method. I personally like the cross multiplication method, but we're going to do both. So the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to move the proportion over here, and I'm going to put my unit rate in the middle. So I'm going to figure out first how much 1 kilogram of pickerel is by dividing both terms in my proportion by 2. So if I take my calculator and say, what is $17.60 divided by 2? That tells me it's $8.80 for 1 kilogram of pickerel, and therefore, for 1.6 kilograms, we'd be taking that $18, sorry, not $18, $8.80, multiplying it by the 1.6 kilograms of pickerel. It tells me it's $14.08 for 1.6 kilograms. Okay, that's using the unit rate method. If I take that same proportion and use my algebra method, my equation will first go across here to give me 2x. Across here I need to use my calculator. 17.60 multiplied by 1.6 equals 28.16. 16. Divide both sides by 2. And when I divide $28.16 by 2, I get $14.08. Same answer. Okay. Just out of curiosity, those of you who did this, how many of you used the unit rate method to solve the pickerel question? How much it is? How many of you used the cross multiplication? Okay. So in an ideal world, you would probably have used the unit rate method. You said, I want to figure out how much 1 kilogram of pickerel is, and then I could figure out how much 1.6 kilograms is. But this is a beautiful method that does work. Question 18, in an amusement park, a new thrill ride was introduced. It cost $7.50 for 3 rides on the Wild Slider. What is the Wild Slider's unit rate per ride? So per ride, this means that ride will be my second term. So we're going to have a rate that starts as being cost for rides. The rate that was given was $7.50 for 3 rides. So therefore the unit rate of the cost for 1 ride using division will be $2.50 per ride. At this rate, what would it cost for 18 rides? So it says determine using 2 different ways. So obviously the easiest one to do this would be to set it up as a proportion and put 18. What would be the easiest way? Multiply by 18. Use your multiplication method. And when you take $2.50 and you multiply it by 18 rides, the cost will be $45 to ride it 18 times. That's using the multiplication. Another way you could do it is the cross multiplication. And what makes this really easy is that if you look across here, when I multiply it across this way, 1 times x is x, which means whatever the product is on the other diagonal will be the answer, right? So if I take my 250 again and multiply it by 18. I still get 45, right? X equals 45. Either method works. Probably this is what most people would have done, but understanding that if you have a unit rate and you're solving proportions, one side will be just X by itself and the other diagonal multiplication will be your answer. Question 9, determine the missing value in each of the equivalent fractions. So if I look at just this part right here, when you have a proportion with a missing value, always look to the one you know both parts of and start from that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say 18 divided by 6 gave me 3. So if I divide this part by 6, I will get my other part. And 24 divided by 6 is 4. Now conversely, if I was to go the other direction, I could say dividing this by 2 gave me 12. So dividing this by 2 gives me 9. So both ways I used the proportion that I knew both terms from and found the other missing parts because of that. The second question, I know both parts here. So what did I multiply 144 by to get, or 48 by to get 144? I'm going to pretend I don't know because that's a tough one, right? I don't naturally see 48 times 3 as being 144, do you? I don't. So what we're going to do here to solve this is I'm going to use the cross multiplication. And I'm going to put an x here. So 48x will equal 144 times 16, which is 2,304. And to isolate for x, what am I going to do? Divide both sides by 48. And x will equal 2,304 divided by 48 equals 48. Is that right? Who knew? 48. So x equals 48. Now if I look at the next proportion, I have 144 over 48 equals I don't know over 64. What's probably the best way to solve this? Do you know what 48 times what is 64? Do I know what I multiply that by? That's no good. What's the easiest way to use? Let's do cross multiplication again. 48x will equal 144 multiplied by 64. Now what am I going to do once I put 9216 down here? If I put 9216 down here, I'm going to divide both sides by 48 to figure out the answer. So right away I'm just going to take that answer, divide it by 48, and that missing value up top is 192. Somebody said the question 20 was the hard one. So let's look at question 20. The breakfast cereal contains corn, wheat, and rice in the ratio of 3 to 4 to 2. So before I go any further, I'm going to put the words corn to wheat to rice as a 3-term ratio. And I'm then going to put the numbers that correspond to the parts in that 3-term ratio. So once we have that ratio written down, it says if a box of cereal contains 225 grams of corn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 225 here, and I can make it either X and Y, or you can just leave them blank. It doesn't matter. I'm using X and Y, but you don't have to use either. It's fine. How much rice does it contain? So there are 3 ways you can solve this, just like there were in all the other proportional reasoning. You could figure out what did you multiply or divide 3 by to get 225, right? So what you could really do is set it up as being 3 over 225 is equal to 4 over x if you wanted to. You could do that. You could also set it up as being 3 over 4 is equal to 225 over x. That is fine as well. All right, but what we're really going to do is we're going to take the second one here, and if we think about what this says, it says the corn to wheat ratio. So the corn to wheat ratio is 3 to 4, which will be corn being 225. What is the wheat? So what did I multiply 3 by to get 225? Does anyone know 3 times what is 225? How can we figure out that multiplier? take 225 and divide it by 3, and that will tell me my multiplier, correct? So if I divide that by 3, it tells me that 3 times 75 is 225. And therefore, if it's proportional, and I multiply the second term by 75, I will get that x is equal to 75 times 4, which is 300. Okay. So the way I could solve that is by putting it in that terms. So now, I now have a second proportion to solve. So I'm going to use a wheat to rice proportion. And I'm going to say the wheat to rice proportion is 4 parts wheat to 2 parts rice. If there are 300 parts of wheat, how many parts of rice are there? Okay. And we could probably see that the real ratio of wheat to rice is 2 parts wheat in lowest terms to 1 part rice. And if there are 300 parts of wheat, you might be able to do it in your head and say that there must be half as many rice parts. You could also do it by multiplication. This is times 75, this is times 75, and either way you get it, you figure out that the ratio would be this. So if you were making it using the same ratio of corn to wheat to rice, if there's 225 grams of corn in this particular cereal box, you must have 300 grams of wheat and 150 grams of rice. So David can saw, question 21 says, David could saw a log into 3 pieces in 7 minutes. If he continues sawing at a constant rate, how long will it take for him to saw a similar log into 6 pieces? So this is an interesting one. If you saw a log, and I'm going to draw this for a second. This is the log here. Okay, this is the log. If you cut it into 3 pieces, the question is, how many cuts do you need to make? 2 cuts. So if I make 1 cut and 2 cuts, I will need to make 2 cuts to make 3 pieces. All right. And if I was to take another log and cut it into 6 pieces, how many cuts do I need to make here? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That makes it into 6 pieces. So what we're really looking at is a ratio of times to pieces. So before I start it up, I'm going to put time to pieces as my ratio, or my rate. And I'm going to say it's 7 minutes. Sorry, not pieces, cuts. My fault. Time to cuts. My fault. So it takes 7 minutes to make 2 cuts, right? The 2 cuts have nothing to do with the fact there's 3 pieces. So 3 pieces is not really what he's doing. He is cutting the log twice in 7 minutes to make 3 pieces, right? That is going to be proportional to how long for 5 cuts. So 7 minutes to do 2 cuts, X minutes to do 5 cuts. We have 3 options for determining how long it's going to be. They are multiply divide method, we have unit rate method, and we have cross multiplication. So does anyone know what I multiply 2 by to get 5? 2.5. So if you know that, this is the most effective method, or most efficient method, excuse me, to solve the question. You would multiply both by 2.5. And then you would take your 7 minutes multiplied by 2.5, and you would realize that it would take 17.5 minutes, or more appropriately, 17 minutes and 30 seconds. Agreed? So if it takes him 7 minutes to make 2 cuts, it will take him 17 minutes and 30 seconds to make 5 cuts, or to make 6 pieces in the log. Okay? Another way you could have done that is if it takes 7 minutes to do 2 cuts, how many minutes does it take to make 1 cut? The answer would be 3.5 minutes. And therefore, to make 5 cuts, you would multiply it by 5, and you would get 17.5 minutes for 5 cuts. This is called the unit rate method. Break your thing down to a unit rate, or per 1 unit of time, or 1 cut, excuse me. And another way we could have solved it is by saying 7 minutes for 2 cuts is how much time for 5 cuts. And I could have cross-multiplied. What would my equation have been if I cross-multiplied? 2x, because I multiply this direction first, equals 35. Divide both sides by 2, and x will equal 17.5, or 17 minutes and 30 seconds. Question 22 is one of my favorite questions in the textbook. It says the height of an object compared to the length of its shadow is constant for all objects at a given time. Now what's cool about this is in the summertime when we go to June, we're actually going to go over to the field and we're going to measure the height of trees in the park, and we're going to measure the height of the light posts in the baseball field, and we're going to use this same method as we go about and do that. So by using this idea of a tree's height, the ratio of a tree height, H-E-I-G-H-T, to the length of its shadow is proportional to any object's height, any other object's height, to its shadow. So what that's saying is any two objects, the ratio of the object's height to its shadow will be proportional to any other object's height and its shadow. So that means if I'm standing in the middle of a field, my height and my shadow are proportional. So if Donovan is standing next to me, his shadow will be proportional to his height. So whose shadow would be larger, mine or Donovan's? My proportionally larger. Isn't it arbitrarily larger? It's proportional to my height. So the taller I am, the longer my shadow will be. The shorter I am, the shorter my shadow will be, proportionally to the object. So if I look at this question, if a 15-meter tree casts a 9-meter shadow, what will the height of a student be? What will the student's height be, or the object's height be, if its shadow is 1.08 meters? So if I know that the shadow that a student casts is 1.08 meters, I could then figure out how tall the student is, right? I could use one of 3 methods. I could use my unit rate method, I could use my my multiplication division method, or I could use my cross multiplication method. In this particular question, what do you think the most efficient method is? What method would you use? I would use cross multiplication, right? I would say, you know what, I'm not going to bother thinking about what did I divide 9 by to get 1.08. That's too difficult for me. I could figure out what is the ratio for 1 meter of shadow, and then figure out, I could do the unit rate of that tree. But the most effective method is to say 9x equals the product of 15 and 1.08. 15.08, sorry, that's not right. 15 multiplied by 1.08 is 16.2. In order to find the value of x, what would I have to do to both sides? Divide both sides by 9, or take 16.2 and divide it by 9 to isolate the variable, and I would get that x is equal to 1.8. And therefore, the height of that person is 1.8 meters, or 180 centimeters, or 7 centimeters shorter than Mr. Mack, because I'm 187. In B, it says if a 50-meter tower has a shadow of 16 meters. So now we're going to go with object to shadow. We're going to set it up as a ratio of the object's height to its shadow. And if it's 50 meters tall and its shadow is 16 meters, how tall is a student who's 1.5? How big a shadow would a 1.5 meter student have? There's our x. Best method. Let's talk about it. Do I know right off the bat what 50 divided by is to get 1.5? You could figure out, right, you could figure out, you could go 50 divided by 1.5 is what, but that's the multiplier, not the divider. But the easier way is simply to create your algebraic equation. 16.1.5 is 24, I think. Is it really, Donnie? Or are you just saying that? Right off the bat, without doing the division in a calculator, I know it's pretty close to what number? 0 decimal? Really close to 0 decimal what? Why 0 decimal 5? Because it's almost 25 over 50, which would be half. So when I take my calculator, I can expect that to be my answer. 24 divided by 50 is 0.48. So how long of a shadow would a 1.5 meter person cast on that same day at the same time? It would cast a 0.48 meter shadow or a 48 centimeter shadow.